Most people walked past the playground without a second glance, barely noticing the quiet young woman sitting all alone near the edge. But not him. Charlotte Blake sat perfectly still in her wheelchair, parked beside a bench at the far end of the neighborhood park. She looked calm, almost peaceful, but there was a stillness in her that felt heavy, like something long buried. The sun was out, peeking gently through the moving branches above, making dancing patterns of light and shadow on the ground. In her lap sat a small cupcake, the icing starting to melt a little, leaning to one side. No candle, no singing, no one else, just her. It was her 24th birthday today, and no one had remembered. Her golden hair was braided and hung loose over her shoulder. She wore a soft cream cardigan over a light blue blouse and a pair of dark jeans. The paper plate holding her cupcake was warm under her hands. She hadn't expected a celebration, not anymore. But still, deep down, she'd hoped for something. A text, a knock on the door, a familiar voice. Just anything to show someone still cared. But nothing came. 4 years ago, everything in Charlotte's world had shifted. She was just a bold, happy college student then, out for a drive with her mom. They were laughing, playing music, planning where to eat lunch. And then, the sound of screeching tires, metal crunching, her mother's scream. Then silence. Her mom was gone in an instant. Charlotte survived but never walked again. Her father, James Blake, the CEO of Blake Tech, and once the most loving man in her world, changed too. The warmth in his eyes had vanished. He stopped dancing in the kitchen, stopped asking if she'd eaten. He buried himself in work and airports and silence. He never blamed her with words, but she felt it every day. Since then, Charlotte had made it a quiet tradition. Every year on her birthday, she returned to this park, the place her mom used to bring her as a child, where the swings felt like flying and her laughter had once outshined the wind. Today she brought her own cupcake, because no one else would. As a breeze passed, it lifted a strand of her hair. She looked down at the vanilla frosting. No wish to make. No one to make it for. Until she heard a voice. "Hi." Charlotte looked up. A little girl stood just a few steps away. She was maybe 3 years old, wearing pink leggings and a yellow dress with tiny silver stars printed on it. Her sun hat was slightly crooked, and a soft teddy bear hung from her arm. The girl wasn't scared. She didn't stare. She didn't even seem to notice the wheelchair. "My name's Luna," the girl said cheerfully. "I really want to play. My daddy said I can ask." Charlotte blinked, unsure what to say. She opened her mouth, then closed it. But just then, a man walked up behind the girl. He looked to be in his early 30s, tall with slightly worn jeans, a faded t-shirt, and light stubble on his chin. Handsome in a quiet, tired sort of way, like someone who had learned to carry a lot without complaining. "I'm so sorry," he said gently, resting a hand on Luna's shoulder. "She saw you sitting alone and, well, I told her she could ask nicely." Charlotte looked from him to Luna, then down at the cupcake in her lap. A soft breath escaped her lips, half sigh, half laugh. "It's okay," she said. Luna lit up with joy. "Can we play now?" Charlotte hesitated, then gave a small nod. "I could use a friend today." The man relaxed, visibly relieved. "I'm Daniel," he said, offering a quick smile. Luna immediately dropped onto the grass beside Charlotte and pulled out a little cloth bag filled with colorful plastic blocks. "We're making a castle," she announced proudly. Charlotte smiled, moved her wheelchair a bit closer, and handed Luna a red block. The motion was smooth, practiced. Daniel sat nearby, not too close, not too far, watching with quiet interest. "Castles, huh?" he said. "The kind with pancakes?" Luna nodded seriously. "And dragons who like cookies?" Daniel chuckled. Charlotte laughed. "Just A little, but more than she had in weeks. They stayed like that, sitting together in the soft afternoon light. A young woman, a little girl, and a stranger building a tiny kingdom on the grass. Charlotte's cupcake sat forgotten behind her on the bench. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was just waiting. Someone had noticed. Her. Seen her. And something, small but real, had started to shift. Charlotte didn't think she'd see them again. She figured it was a nice moment, nothing more. A kind little girl and her sweet dad, just passing through. But 3 days. Later she was sketching in her favorite cafe, Cafe Bellflower, when she heard it. "That's her, Daddy." Charlotte looked up, startled. Luna was already halfway across the cafe, waving like she'd spotted a celebrity. Her tiny rain boots squeaked on the floor. The girl stopped at Charlotte's table, clutching a napkin. "Hi again. Are you drawing?" Charlotte tried to hide her smile. "Yes," she said softly. Seconds later, Daniel arrived, slightly out of breath. "I'm so sorry," he said, brushing his hair back. "She remembered you." Charlotte looked him over. A navy hoodie, jeans with a bit of dust on them, and scuffed up work boots. "It's okay," she replied. "She's hard to forget." Luna pointed at the notebook. "Can I see?" Charlotte turned it toward her. It was an unfinished drawing of a tree and a bench. "Whoa," Luna whispered. "You're like a real artist," Daniel chuckled. "She's been into painters lately. Watched a documentary about Monet. She calls him the puddle painter." Charlotte laughed. A real quiet laugh. Luna beamed with pride. They didn't stay long. Daniel bought a coffee to go, promised Luna she could use crayons at home, and as they walked away, Charlotte looked at the empty space they left behind, and wondered why it suddenly felt so quiet. A week passed. Charlotte was rolling through the tea aisle of a local supermarket when she heard it again. "Daddy, it's her. The princess drawer." Charlotte turned. Luna stood holding a loaf of bread like it was a royal treasure. Daniel appeared right behind her, pushing a cart full of groceries. "Luna," he whispered. "Inside voice, please." Charlotte smiled. "It's okay." Luna ran over. "Can I buy you a cookie for your birthday? I didn't get to last time." Daniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We'll have to check the budget, honey." Charlotte's chest tightened. His voice was kind but tired, the kind of tired that counts every dollar. She quickly said, "I was actually going to buy cookies. Maybe we can pick one out together?" Luna lit up. She took Charlotte's hand for a moment before pointing excitedly toward the shelves. They picked out a soft-baked oatmeal raisin cookie. Daniel thanked her, more than once. Later, Charlotte sat in her car, the cookie still untouched in her lap, and thought about Luna's kindness and Daniel's quiet steadiness. The third time felt different. It had rained all morning and the park was almost empty. But Charlotte went anyway. She loved the smell of fresh rain, the way the world felt softer. She was about to leave, until she saw them. Daniel was twirling Luna under a gazebo. Her yellow boots splashed through puddles as she laughed. He caught her in his arms, spinning her, holding her as she squealed with joy. Charlotte froze. She remembered dancing like that with her dad, in the kitchen, in the rain, before everything fell apart. She wheeled herself away quickly, heart pounding, breath tight. She didn't want to cry, not here. But then she saw something across the field. An elderly woman was struggling with her grocery bags in the rain. Daniel walked right over. He took off his coat, wrapped it around her shoulders, handed her his umbrella, and smiled gently as she patted his hand with thanks. Charlotte watched from under the trees, tears welling in her eyes. Her father had once been like that too, kind, attentive, protective, before grief hardened him. She didn't realize she was crying until her hand trembled in her lap. But the tears didn't feel bad. They came from something deeper, not just pain, but memory, and maybe recognition. Something about that little girl, that quiet father, and that moment felt like it had found her, not the other way around. Charlotte stayed in the rain longer than she'd meant to, and when she left, she carried something new with her. Not hope, not yet, but a question. Maybe this wasn't just coincidence. Charlotte began to notice it in small ways, the soft pattern of it. Every Tuesday and Friday, Daniel and Luna would appear at the park. Sometimes they arrived just after her. Other times they were already there, waiting. One day, Luna swung from the monkey bars and called out, "Daddy says this is our Charlotte. Time! Because I told him you come when the sky is soft blue." Charlotte looked up. The sky was soft blue. She turned her gaze toward Daniel, who was crouched nearby, adjusting the wheel on a small tricycle. He met her eyes and smiled gently. "She's got a sixth sense," he said. Charlotte smiled. "Or maybe she's just very good at patterns." Over time, their park visits became something more. Daniel brought coffee, Luna brought drawings, and Charlotte brought grapes, which Luna devoured. They'd sit under the same tree, sharing snacks and stories, watching Luna build castles or chase butterflies. Charlotte didn't realize when those afternoons became the ones she most looked forward to. One particularly warm day, she struggled with a water bottle, twisting the cap with one hand while steadying her lap with the other. Daniel noticed without a word. He walked over, gently took the bottle, opened it, and handed it back. No comment, no pity, just a quiet gesture. Another time when her wheelchair wheel jammed in the gravel, he crouched without hesitation and fixed it, then stood brushing off his hands. Charlotte watched him. "Do you fix everything that easily?" "Only what I'm allowed to," he said, meeting her eyes. She didn't know how to answer. A week later, Luna came down with a fever. Daniel texted to say they wouldn't be at the park. Charlotte felt a pang of disappointment, then guilt. She baked cookies. At first it was just something to do, but as the scent of cinnamon filled her apartment, she felt steadier. It reminded her of her mother, how she used to bake on rainy days, how warmth could exist in memory. Almost without thinking, Charlotte sent a message. "Is he feeling better?" Daniel replied. "Still warm." But she asked if the cookie lady would visit. She stared at the screen, then typed, "I have leftovers. Want to come by?" His reply came moments later. "We'd love to." It was the first time she'd invited anyone into her home in years. Daniel and Luna stepped inside with quiet curiosity. Pale yellow walls, art supplies on shelves, soft light, cozy and calm. Luna sat at the small dining table, hugging her stuffed bunny. Charlotte placed a plate of cookies in front of her. Still warm, Daniel removed his work boots near the door without being asked. They ate, laughed, drank tea. Later, with Luna asleep, on the couch, Charlotte and Daniel stood side by side in the kitchen washing dishes. Charlotte passed him a bowl and their fingers touched. Just a second. She froze. He didn't. He looked at her, calm, warm, then reached for a towel. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For what?" he asked gently. You don't have to explain," he said. She glanced up. He was drying the bowl like nothing had happened, like he understood more than she could say, and somehow that made her chest ache in a way she didn't expect. After they left, Charlotte wheeled herself into her studio corner and opened her sketchbook. She began to draw from memory, not reference. She drew Daniel crouched in the grass, arms outstretched as Luna ran to him. His smile, his steady hands, the curve of Luna's curls against his chest, the warmth in his eyes. It was the first time in years she had drawn someone not out of habit, but because she wanted to remember how she felt. As her pencil moved, she realized something. Daniel had never asked her about the wheelchair. Not once. And still somehow he was seeing all of her. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to hide. The night air was crisp and quiet. Outside Charlotte's apartment, leaves rustled gently. Inside the kitchen, light cast a soft glow over the small table where she and Daniel sat, 2 mugs of tea between them. Luna had fallen asleep hours ago after a day of painting and sidewalk chalk. She lay curled on the couch, a blanket pulled to her chin, the white noise machine humming beside her. Charlotte cradled her mug with both hands. Her fingers trembled faintly against the ceramic. Daniel didn't speak. He just waited. When she looked at him, she didn't see pity or curiosity. She saw someone who wasn't rushing her, someone who stayed. "It's never told anyone everything," she said softly. Daniel nodded. She set the mug down. "It was raining that day. Just a mist, really. I was 20, college sophomore. I had a migraine and Mom insisted on driving me back to campus." Her voice caught. She took a slow breath. "We were on Highway 63. A truck came too fast around the bend. We swerved, hit the guardrail. I remember her scream, then nothing." Daniel sat still, eyes steady on hers. "I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. Couldn't feel my legs. They told me she died instantly, that it was quick." Charlotte looked down, pulling at her cardigan sleeves. "My dad was there when I woke up, but he didn't speak. Just stared out the window. And when he finally looked at me," her voice faltered, "it was like I was a stranger." Daniel didn't interrupt. I kept waiting for him to say, "It's not your fault," or "I'm glad you're alive." He never did. He just worked more, traveled more, and I stayed in this chair in this city alone. Daniel reached forward, placing his hand gently over hers. It wasn't forceful. It was grounding. Charlotte stared at their hands, her breath shaky. "I always thought if I hadn't asked her to drive, if I just pushed through the headache, maybe she'd still be alive. Maybe he'd still love me." Daniel's grip tightened just slightly. "Charlotte," he said quietly, "you are not the reason shed aid." She didn't pull away. Her eyes welled, but she held his gaze. "And I don't think your father hates you," he continued. "I think he lost the person he loved most. And when that happens, sometimes people don't know how to love what's left." Charlotte blinked. A tear slipped free. "How do you know that?" Daniel looked down, silent, for a long moment. "My wife's name was Natalie," he said. "She was a chef. We met in culinary school. We used to dance while pasta boiled." A soft smile tugged at his lips, but his jaw clenched. "She got sick when Luna was a baby. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. It happened so fast, hell it out of breath. After she died, I stopped cooking. Stopped everything. I drank too much. The house fell apart. I did too." Charlotte listened wide-eyed. "A morning, I found Luna sitting on the kitchen floor trying to butter toast. She looked up and said, 'It's okay, Daddy. I feed you now.' She was 2. A pause. Then she saved me." Charlotte's throat tightened. She reached for her tea, mostly to steady her hand, but Daniel didn't move his. His hand stayed atop hers, real, warm, solid. "I don't know if my dad will ever say the words I needed," she whispered. "But for the first time, I think I understand him more than I want to admit." Daniel leaned slightly forward. "Maybe he's not angry. Maybe he's just hurting. Sometimes pain makes people forget how to show love." Charlotte met his gaze. Her eyes were glassy but open. "Maybe," she said quietly. And the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt like healing. The afternoon was calm, almost deceptively so. The wind moved gently through the trees of the park, rustling the leaves, and soft waves. Charlotte sat beneath their favorite tree. Luna sprawled out on the picnic blanket, drawing suns with purple crayons. Daniel was nearby, unpacking snacks from a worn tote bag. It felt like any other quiet, perfect moment until the sharp click of leather shoes on pavement broke the peace. Charlotte turned her head and froze. Her father was standing just beyond the pathway, dressed in a dark gray suit, polished shoes, and a look on his face that sent a chill straight through her. James Blake. Even from 10 yards away, his presence was commanding, cold, imposing. Charlotte slowly straightened her posture in her wheelchair, heart pounding. She hadn't seen him in person for months. Their conversations had dwindled to emotionless. Text updates about trust funds and quarterly health check-ins. Now here he was, eyes locked not on her, but on Daniel. Daniel, who had risen instinctively, wiping his hands on his jeans, cautious but calm. Charlotte's voice cracked first. "Dad, what are you?" "I've been hearing things," James said coolly, stepping forward. "About my daughter, the one I assumed was still focused on her recovery. Not," he glanced at Daniel, then at Luna, "playing house in public parks." Daniel's jaw tensed, but he didn't speak. Charlotte inhaled sharply. "You don't get to show up after months and talk like that." James ignored her. His eyes remained on Daniel. "You're the man she's been spending time with." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." James folded his arms. "You fix air conditioners." "I do." "And you have a child." "I do." James paused. "Let me make this simple. My daughter is not some charity case. She's the sole heir to a billion-dollar enterprise. She requires stability, resources, medical attention. Not," he motioned dismissively toward Daniel, "whatever this is." Charlotte's hands clenched the sides of her chair. She needs a life built on security, not sentiment. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but Charlotte raised a hand to stop him. Her voice was clear, sharper than it had ever been with her father. "No," she said. "I'll speak." James turned to her, surprised. Charlotte rolled forward a few feet until she was between the two men. "You think I need saving?" she said to her father. "That I'm still the broken girl in the hospital bed, the one who needs a full-time team and a PR shield and a silent life in a glass box so the Blake name doesn't look weak." James frowned. "That's not what it is," she cut in. "You've never looked at Metha same since the accident. Not once. And now that I'm doing something, anything that you didn't plan, you think it's dangerous." James's jaw tightened. She turned slightly, gesturing to Daniel. "This man never once pied me. Never once looked at this chair before he looked at me." Then softly, but with steel in her voice, she added, "You're scared." "I'm fragile, Dad. But he's the one who saw strength in me when you never bothered to look." Silence. Even Luna paused in her drawing, sensing the shift in the air. James looked at his daughter for a long time. Expression unreadable. "You're making a mistake," he said eventually quietly. "No," Charlotte replied, steady now. "I'm finally making a choice." Daniel stepped closer, not protectively, but supportively, grounded, quiet, present. James turned away without another word, walking back the way he came, shoes striking the pavement. With mechanical precision. Charlotte didn't move until the sound faded completely. Only then did she let out a long, shaking breath. Daniel knelt beside her, resting a hand lightly on her arm. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yeah," she whispered, because for once I didn't stay silent, and somehow, even with her heart still trembling, she felt lighter, like something long buried had finally been exhaled. The days that followed were unusually quiet. No texts, no surprise coffees, no shared afternoons beneath their favorite tree. Charlotte checked her phone more often than she cared to admit, telling herself it was just habit, that Daniel had work, or that Luna had caught another cold, or that maybe, just maybe, he needed space after what happened in the park. She told herself it made sense, but it didn't make it hurt any less. Daniel had vanished like a tide pulling away without warning, and all she could do was sit in the silence he left behind. Across town, Daniel stared at his own phone, thumb hovering over Charlotte's, name for what felt like hours each night. He'd replayed James Blake's words in his mind too many times to count. She needs care, not whatever this is. And maybe he was right. Daniel had no degree, no million-dollar resources, just calloused hands, a toolbox in the back of his truck, and a daughter he was still learning how to raise without falling apart. He couldn't ask Charlotte to choose between the life her family expected and the life she was building, not if it meant turning her into a battleground. So, he stepped back, quietly, deliberately. He didn't realize how much Luna would notice. "Why? Isn't she coming anymore?" Luna asked on the third day. She sat cross-legged on the floor, teddy bear in one hand, staring at the door like Charlotte might walk through at any second. Daniel knelt beside her. "Sometimes people need time," he said, gently. After Daniel departed, Sarah looked over at, "Did you make her sad?" Luna asked. His chest tightened. "I hope not." Luna nodded solemnly, then whispered, "I miss her. I miss her." Daniel did too, more than he had words for. Charlotte returned to the playground on a whim the following week. Same bench, same view, same cupcake, small and undecorated, balanced on her lap. No one had remembered her birthday this year either. Not really. But unlike the last time, she didn't cry. She just sat breathing in the cool breeze, listening to the sound of children playing at a distance. The sun filtered softly through the trees, and then she heard footsteps, slow, familiar. She didn't turn right away. "Hey!" Daniel's voice broke gently, through the quiet. Charlotte looked up. He stood just a few feet away, his hair sullied from wind, eyes tired, but warm. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure I should," he admitted. She stared at him, unsure what to say. Daniel stepped closer, then slowly, deliberately lowered himself to one knee beside her wheelchair. "I thought staying away would make things easier for you," he said. "That maybe distance would protect you." He looked up, eyes meeting hers fully. "But today is the day you were born, Charlotte, and I couldn't not be here for that." Her throat tightened. The cupcake on her lap trembled slightly in its paper wrapper. Daniel reached forward, gently resting a hand over hers. "You matter to me," he said. "Not because of what you can do or who your family is, but because when I'm near you, I remember who I want to be." Charlotte's eyes welled, but she didn't look. Away. Then slowly Daniel leaned in and pressed the softest kiss to her forehead. A breath caught in her throat, and just as he pulled back, a small blur of motion came tumbling toward them. "Charlotte!" Luna squealed, arms outstretched. She wrapped herself around both of them, hugging Charlotte's waist and Daniel's shoulders in one clumsy, perfect embrace. And there, under the gentle sky, the three of them stayed, arms around each other, still silent and whole, in a way none of them had expected. Not flawless, not grand, just real and enough. James Blake was not the kind of man who lingered in public places, but there he was, standing across the street from the city central garden, shielded behind tinted windows in the back seat of his town car, watching from a distance. His assistant had told him where to find her. He had expected quiet, solitude, the usual image of his daughter, composed but distant, elegant but unreachable. What he saw instead made him pause. Charlotte was laughing. It was not the polite, practiced smile he had grown used to seeing at charity events or board dinners. It was open, unguarded, real. She sat on a picnic blanket, her sketchbook open beside her, a smear of yellow paint on her wrist. Luna danced barefoot in the grass nearby, spinning in uneven circles. Daniel was beside Charlotte, shirt sleeves rolled up, holding 2 cups of lemonade, and trying and failing not to spill them, while laughing at something Luna had said. Charlotte leaned into him effortlessly, not to be helped, just to be close. James's fingers tightened around the headrest in front of him. He hadn't seen that light in her since before the accident, since before her mother. A pang of something deep and ancient pulled in his chest. "Pull over," he said. The driver hesitated, then obeyed. James stepped out into the sun, adjusting his jacket as he walked with careful precision toward the garden path. Charlotte looked up first. Her body stiffened instinctively, but she didn't flinch. She didn't hide. Daniel stood beside her, quietly protective, while Luna paused mid-spun to peer at the well-dressed stranger with wide, curious eyes. James approached. Slowly, his gaze not on Daniel this time, but on his daughter. When he stopped just a few feet away, his voice was not the commanding tone that once echoed through boardrooms. It was softer, older. "Charlotte," he said. "Dad?" He looked at her. Truly looked, and for a moment he didn't speak. Then, "Are you happy?" The question hung in the air. Charlotte swallowed. Her hand found the edge of her sketchbook. "Yes," she said quietly. "For the first time since Mom died." James blinked, and something in his shoulders eased. He nodded once, then turned to Daniel. "Walk with me," he said. Daniel looked to Charlotte. She gave him a small nod. They walked a short distance down the path, the quiet between them layered, with things unspoken. "I misjudged you," James said eventually, hands folded behind his back. "At first glance, I saw a man with no pedigree, no access, just a pair of calloused hands and a little girl with grass-stained shoes." Daniel didn't respond. "But then I saw her," James continued. "My daughter smiling, breathing again, not just existing, living." He stopped walking. "I didn't lose her in that crash," he said, "but I lost her in the years after." Daniel met his eyes. "You didn't know how to hold the pain." James exhaled slowly as if releasing something he'd held too long. "No," he admitted. "I didn't." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I've rewritten the succession plan," he said. "There's a portion of the company, one I intended to sell, dedicated to community outreach and small business development. I am transferring it to you." Daniel stared at him, stunned. "Sir, this isn't a dowry," James interrupted. "Firm, but not unkind. And it's not about status. It's about the fact that you gave my daughter something I couldn't." His voice lowered. "You brought her back to herself." A silence passed between them. Then James offered a hand. Daniel hesitated and took it. As they walked back toward the blanket, Charlotte looked up, eyes searching. James offered a nod to his daughter. And for the first time in 4 years, she smiled at him, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. She had not fought for her father's approval, but somehow through love, not force, she'd received his respect. The sun spilled golden light over the park where everything had begun. A soft breeze rustled through the trees, carrying laughter, music, and the faint scent of roses from a nearby garden bed. The same playground where Charlotte Blake had once sat alone on her birthday, cupcake in hand, silence wrapped around her like a second skin, was now alive with gentle celebration. Today it hosted her engagement party. There were no extravagant flower arches or tuxedoed servers, just picnic blankets, foldable chairs, a string of lights draped between 2 trees, and people who mattered. There were 2 housemen. Daniel stood in, a simple button-up, Luna perched proudly on his hip, her dress dotted with tiny stars. Charlotte sat beside them in her wheelchair, her golden hair braided loosely to the side, a soft smile blooming as if spring had moved in behind her ribs. Luna squirmed down and tugged at something behind her back. "I made this," she said, presenting a delicate bracelet made of bright beads and elastic string. "It's for you," Charlotte blinked. "For me?" Luna nodded solemnly. "For my new mommy?" Charlotte's hand trembled as she took the bracelet. It was imperfect. One bead was too big, another slightly cracked, but it was more precious than any diamond. She slipped it on, tears blurring her vision. "Thank you, Luna. I'll wear it always." James Blake watched from nearby, hands clasped behind his back. He wore No suit jacket today, just a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked older in the soft light, more human. He approached slowly. For a moment, no one spoke. Then James knelt beside his daughter and pulled her gently into his arms. It was not grand, not performative, just a quiet, firm embrace, the kind that says everything without a single word. Charlotte closed her eyes, resting her chin on his shoulder. It felt like a puzzle piece sliding into place. Later that evening, as the sky shifted to lavender and the fairy lights began to glow, Charlotte wheeled herself over to a nearby easel covered with a cloth. "Before the day ends," she said, clearing her throat, "I want to share something." Everyone quieted. She lifted the cloth. The painting revealed was soft and vivid. A wheelchair sat in the foreground, its wheels catching a hint of sunlight. Behind, it stood two figures, one tall, one just a little shorter, hands on the handles pushing together. In front of them, a little girl, arms wide, mouth open in laughter, running forward like she owned the wind. Below the painting, written in careful script, were the words, "Family isn't built by blood. It's built by those who stay." Silence fell. Not the kind born of discomfort, but the sacred kind. The kind that settles over hearts when they recognize truth. Daniel reached for Charlotte Chand. James placed a steadying one on her shoulder. Luna pressed her head against her side. And in that moment, under the same trees where once sat a lonely girl with a cupcake, a family was born. Not through legacy or contracts, but through love that stayed, healed, and chose. Always. Thank you for joining Charlotte's journey. A story of healing, love, and chosen family. If it touched your heart, don't let this be the last chapter. Subscribe to soul-stirring stories for more tales of resilience and quiet courage. And if Charlotte, Daniel, and little Luna moved you, tap that high button to support stories that remind us you are never too broken to begin again. Until next time, stay gentle, stay brave, and keep believing in love.